Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry. Today's video is going to be my review of the new Summon Showcase Springtime Spree, which lasts from today until February 14th. Now this showcase isn't a seasonal or a limited time one, meaning that all of the featured items here will appear in the normal summoning pool with regular appearance rates in the future. So if you're worried about missing out, you shouldn't have to worry too much with this showcase. That said, this is going to be your best chance to get the characters, dragons, and wyrmprints who have been given a rate up, so do keep that in mind when you're deciding to summon. As usual, I'll be going through everything featured on this banner with the timestamps on the screen now. Of course, with the new showcase comes a new giveaway, so do look out for the Gleam link in the description below if you want to take part in that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our first wyrmprint. So to start things off, we have our 3-star featured wyrmprint, Blossoms Ablaze. Blossoms Ablaze has one ability, Broken Punisher, but it's exclusive to Wind Element Adventurers. Now I'm not too crazy about these element-specific and weapon-specific wyrmprints, since I think it's more worth your time to invest in more general-use wyrmprints that you can equip to a variety of adventurers, but this is a pretty powerful ability to have on a 3-star wyrmprint. Now the big question with 3-star wyrmprints at the moment is just how they're going to implement the potential dual wyrmprint system in the future. It's been announced that wyrmprints are being looked at, and if there's some kind of rarity restrictions about which combinations of wyrmprints you can equip, maybe at that point 3 stars start to look a little more valuable. As of now though, the best use of this is probably going to be to sell for Eldwater. Even with a fairly decent ability on a Wind Adventurer, it just probably isn't going to be enough to compensate for Blossoms Ablaze's lower stats. A couple of 4-star wyrmprints also have Broken Punisher, so I've listed those here, and as you can see, they have much higher stats when maxed unbound. Moving on, we come to the second wyrmprint on this list, Promises in the Rain. Now this is an old wyrmprint that's been given an appearance rate up, and it's fitting for this event since the boss is a water boss, and it can inflict Bog. Promises in the Rain provides up to 25% bog resistance and up to 5% water resistance, making it similar to other defensive wyrmprints, which do the same for other elements and afflictions. Now just like Blossoms Ablaze, I think that Promises in the Rain has more potential than it has applications right now. In the future, if we are able to equip 2 wyrmprints, this opens up some nice possibilities for characters who don't get up to 100% bog res. It means that characters without 100% bog res will be more viable for challenges like High Mercury once that's released, so there is some appeal to Promises in the Rain. It's not something I would go out of my way to summon, especially since the Dragon Dance wyrmprint you get for free provides up to 50% bog res just by itself, which is going to be great to patch up your Sufang to 100% for the purpose of the raid. So Promises in the Rain could be a nice pickup down the road, but as of now, it just doesn't have a whole lot of use. Moving on from Promises in the Rain, we come to our second 4-star wyrmprint with a rate up. This one is brand new, and it's Lunar Festivities. Now I love the artwork of this. Elisanne, Yuden, and Not look really cute on this wyrmprint, so if you're going for art or you're a collector, just want to say this one looks really nice. But do remember, even though this is celebrating a specific holiday, this wyrmprint is going to be part of the normal summoning pool. Now as for abilities, this wyrmprint is all about Force Strikes. So the first ability is something pretty familiar. It's going to provide extra 4-strike damage. That's pretty nice to have. Just do bear in mind that AI characters don't use 4 strikes, so this is something you'll want to use on your team leader. And there are other wyrmprints that provide this ability, like the Warrioresses or Fresh Perspective, which provide extra critical damage and extra skill damage respectively. So the second ability may also be something you're looking at to differentiate Lunar Festivities, and it is a brand new ability, Striking Haste. It increases skill gauge fill rate by up to 8% when the user's 4 strikes connect. So I'm not a huge fan of this, but sword units do like skill haste. They can activate their skills pretty quickly, they have a fast SP charge rate, and they want to use 4 strikes when the enemy is in overdrive because their 4 strikes are one of the quickest at breaking enemies. If you have a sword unit that you want to build up, and conveniently we're going to be looking at one later, then I think this starts to look pretty good. Otherwise, I'm not sure that striking haste is really something you should be looking for. It is a nice wyrmprint. It's a pretty powerful wyrmprint, has a good amount of strength for a 4-star, but I think there are generally better options. For instance, if you played the last facility event, you'll already have Astounding Trick, which is a pretty good wyrmprint on any attacker and not as narrow as Lunar Festivities. So overall, I do think it's pretty cool, neat design, but once again, not one worth going out of your way just to pick up. And, well, that theme continues with our first 5-star wyrmprint, Kung Fu Masters. As before, this wyrmprint has really pretty artwork. It's in one of the higher classes of strength at its rarity, with a max strength of 64 and a max HP of 176. But once again, this wyrmprint has a somewhat narrow use. It is weapon specific in this time, a trend that we saw start with a lance skill damage ability on a wyrmprint last showcase. This time around, we have axe critical rate. Now this is actually pretty good because axe units do have a higher than normal critical chance as part of their design. So axe units have a 4% chance of hitting a critical on normal attacks, whereas other weapon types only have a 2% chance. So it is nice to stack critical rate and critical damage onto axe users. The secondary ability of skill damage is kind of the icing on top. Really though, I just don't think this is super necessary unless you are all about the numbers and all about seeing massive critical hits. If you want to see your axe characters deal out tons of damage, I think this is going to be a fun wyrmprint for that reason. It's going to be great with the new rate-up 5-star character, Lin You, so there is some appeal to this. Besides just the artwork, there's some application, and in the future, once we're able to equip 2 wyrmprints, if that does pan out, then this would be an amazing secondary wyrmprint, even for something like the end game, potentially for high dragons, because it is that powerful on an axe. It's just that it's hard to recommend going too deep on this and trying to max unbind it because of its narrow use, and since as of now, golden fragments are still pretty rare to come by. So for instance, if you want the skill damage, I think something like Resounding Rendition is a much safer and more general pick than this one. If you want the critical rate, I think the same is true of Levin's Champion, and if you just want a free wyrmprint which you can easily get up to level 100, the new Astounding Trick or Plunder Pals, which are free wyrmprints we got in facility events, are going to do just fine for most cases. Now our final 5-star wyrmprint is a really unique one, Warrior Maiden. This wyrmprint features some gorgeous artwork of Jeanne d'Arc, and it has 2 interesting abilities, Recovery Potency and Slayer Strength. This is the first time we've seen Slayer Strength on a 4 or 5-star wyrmprint, which is pretty nice. It's something I like a lot better than Striker Strength, as similar as they might seem, just because it can be difficult to time the Force Strike to actually take down an enemy. Slayer Strength is much more broad. Now, the combination of an offensive ability and a defensive one or a healing one is a little bit awkward to use, but I do think this is a great wyrmprint for someone like Julieta. Since Julieta has built-in last recovery, recovery potency could help with that. If she has Cupid, it could help with Cupid's heal, and she also has built-in Slayer Strength, meaning she's already stacking up more strength when she's defeating foes. So I think she's an amazing user of this. Besides that, you could also look at characters with Striker Strength like Xander, since Xander can equip a Water Elemental Sword which will allow him to heal himself. You could also equip this to someone like Naveed if they're running Phoenix, since Naveed also has Slayer Strength built into his kit. Generally speaking, I think this wyrmprint is unique enough that it's worth some thought and worth some investigation. I could see this being really great in future facility events, where taking out enemies and having the strength is equally important as being able to survive until the final wave. So this is definitely a wyrmprint that excites me. It's probably my favorite of the bunch, although I'm not sure its immediate uses. The 2 comparisons I'd make are to Together We Stand, since that has Striker Strength at 4-star. Like I said, it's more narrow, but Together We Stand also has a skill damage ability. And then to Cleo's Ruse, which as of now is pretty much the best recovery potency wyrmprint at 5-star. So all in all, I like a number of the wyrmprint designs. Some of them, like Lunar Festivities and Kung Fu Masters, are a bit specific, but at least they're thought-provoking. They have potential, especially once we have access to 2 wyrmprints, if that does pan out as we think it will. Promises in the Rain, same applies to that. Blossoms Ablaze, about as much you can expect from a 3-star, and Warrior Maiden is my personal favorite. But now we're going to go ahead and get into the dragons, starting with the featured 4-star Strabog. So Strabog is an HP focused dragon similar to Unicorn and Phoenix. Strabog will provide 30% extra HP to wind adventurers normally and 45% once max unbound. Strabog's skill Test of Integrity deals wind damage to surrounding enemies and draws them toward the user. It's a neat little secondary effect, and I think it makes Strabog pretty nice on tanks, but wind is no stranger to HP dragons. If you're playing back during Kindness and Captivity, you'll have the free dragon Sylvia, and somewhere along the way, you might have also picked up a copy of Garuda, who's a 5-star HP dragon. So I think Strabog does face more competition than someone like Phoenix, for instance, where she's really the only HP flame dragon, but she's a lot better in general because of her heal. Overall, I like Strabog. I like that his skill has a secondary effect. There aren't really a lot of wind healers. There's only Lowen and Sophie, so there's not a huge demand for pure HP dragons, but if you have one of those characters, in particular Lowen, and you don't have Garuda, Strabog is probably going to be one of your best options if you want to make him into a dedicated healer. After Strabog, we come to the new 5-star dragon on this showcase, Long Long. Now, despite his panda-like appearance, Long Long is a dragon, this time one who boosts strength and critical damage. That is a new combination that's unlike any dragon we've had in the past, so it is worth thinking about whether this is better than, say, Rock and Zephyr, which are the dragons who purely boost strength within the Wind's pool. Now, as a 5-star, I can tell you that Long Long is generally going to be better than Rock if you're able to fully unbind either of them. Rock, of course, is more available, so it's more likely you'll be able to get there, but with Long Long, if you were to go in with stones or unbind him over time, eventually he'll match the strength buff provided by Rock, but on top of that provide that critical damage buff. So he's definitely a superior choice there. Zephyr is a bit of a harder calculation, and it ultimately comes down to how many criticals you can expect to land over the course of a match. Now, from what I've seen of the analysis out there, it seems that if you can keep your critical rate around 20% or a little bit above for a max unbound Long Long, that is going to be pretty comparable to what you're getting from Zephyr. So it is hard to achieve that much critical rate. A 5-star dagger can provide 10% critical rate, using an axe can provide 4%, and then you're going to need to get something from your character's innate abilities or from the Wyrmprint that you have equipped to them. So if you're able to achieve that much critical rate, then Long Long starts to look more lucrative than someone like Zephyr, especially the further up past that you push. But outside of that, Long Long is probably going to be a little bit worse. It's not a huge difference. I think that both of them are powerful, but Long Long does require you to jump through more hoops, whereas Zephyr is generally powerful on any wind attacker, tank, support, without a lot of setup involved. So as usual, both dragons are good. Dragons are always nice pickups, but it ultimately comes down to what you have in your roster, what your needs are, and whether you really need to pull for these. And with the dragons out of the way, that brings us to the new adventurers on this showcase. Let's start with a 3-star, this time around a light wand unit, Xiao Lei. Xiao Lei has 2 skills, Flash Strike and Tactical Analysis, the first of which is an attacking skill, pretty straightforward, deals a good amount of light damage to the target and nearby enemies in a small radius, but her second skill, Tactical Analysis, is for sure the more interesting one. Once fully upgraded, this one is going to increase the entire team's critical rate by 8% and increase the modifier applied to critical damage by 40% for 10 seconds. So the game has recently adopted this wording. They used to just say increases critical damage. Now they say increases the modifier applied to critical damage. It's a small distinction, and it's basically to clarify what the actual effect is, but this is nevertheless a very powerful effect. 8% critical rate is pretty significant when you consider that some characters like Mikoto are able to stack up to 20% just based off their innate kit. For someone like Ieyasu, Lin You, or Mikoto, this could be very devastating, especially when combined with a high co-ability dagger on the same team. When you consider the fact that Cupid is a light dragon, and Cupid can further stack critical rate by a ridiculous amount, this starts to look really crazy. Now the rest of Xiao Lei's kit is also pretty good. She has a nice first ability of skill damage of 20%, which while she doesn't have 2 attacking skills, at least her first skill is her attack, so it charges fairly quickly, and Tactical Analysis honestly doesn't have too high of a cooldown either. Besides that, Xiao Lei has Poison Res, which would have been nice on the last facility event, but nevertheless it's not a bad resistance to have for something like Shadow IO, and it does serve to differentiate her from the other 2 wand light units, Lucretia and Amane. Now of course, both Lucretia and Amane do have significantly higher stats than Xiao Lei, and that is a little bit disappointing, but to be expected since she is a 3-star adventurer. For builds for Xiao Lei, I do like the Wyrmprint Resounding Rendition. That is probably my favorite to further increase her skill damage and give her a better chance at landing criticals. If you don't have access to that, I do think Kicking Back is a fun budget alternative. It's going to give her some extra critical rate since she's a light adventurer, and the Shadow Res doesn't hurt either. For dragons, as I said before, I think Cupid is the gold standard for this character, but if you just want to have fun with her and don't have access to Cupid, you could also try Shishimai and stack critical damage buffs instead of that critical rate buff. For teammates, I like Julieta since she also has Poison Res, and as an axe has a heightened base critical rate, and I like Fritz since he has Poison Res and gives that critical rate co-ability to your team. And finally for weapons, I do prefer the 5-star light wand over the 4-star one. The 4-star one provides a defense buff, and the 5-star one provides an attacking skill, and I really think on a character like this with the skill damage co-ability and the primary ability of skill damage, you want as many attacking skills as you can have. Ultimately, just like Zace, Pietro, and Marty, I think that Xiao Lei is a fun 3-star character who will be satisfying to summon and build, even if her final potential is somewhat limited. I can't imagine her being incredibly viable in the end game when you consider there are options out there like Amane and Lucretia, but if for instance Void Battles have some especially challenging poison-related maps, then perhaps Xiao Lei will have her time to shine. Alright, and the next featured character on this showcase is the 4-star Wind Sword, our first Wind Sword in the game, Ku Hai. And let me just say, this looks like an incredible character to me, continuing a recent precedent of 4-star characters being very powerful. It's been true since the beginning of the game, but with the past few showcases, I think we've really seen this stepped up. A lot of these 4 stars, Ku Hai included, look like they could have been 5 stars easily. So what makes Ku Hai so great, in my opinion, is that he does what sword units want to be doing really well. His first skill is a simple attack, Soaring Flicker. It deals damage straight ahead, but it comes out quickly, it's fast to charge, and his second skill is pretty fast to charge too. It doesn't take too much longer to get that ready. Keen Blade is what makes Ku Hai so interesting. It activates a 10-second formation during which his critical rate is going to be increased by 10%, and his 4th strike deals 3 hits of damage. Now the damage itself is slightly reduced compared to normal, and the overdrive diminishing effect is slightly reduced, but because there are 3 hits, when you add it all up, this essentially powers up the overall effect of the 4th strike. Since sword units already want to be spamming their 4 strikes in basically a 1 basic attack, 1 4 strike combo to break bosses very quickly, this is an amazing skill to have. And on top of that, that extra 10% critical rate interacts nicely with Ku Hai's 1st and 3rd ability. His 1st ability gives him up to 15% extra critical damage, and his final ability as a 5-star gives him another 15% as long as his HP is 70% or above. We're talking about 30% extra critical damage and 10 plus a base of 2, so 12% critical rate. With any critical stacking on his Wyrmprint or with other characters on your team, this is going to be really powerful, and especially since his 4th strike gets split into 3 with that Keen Blade skill, you have more chances to proc criticals as well. Besides that, Ku Hai has Bog Res of 100%, which means that he is great for the current raid, potentially great in the future for something like High Mercury, and honestly this is a unit I'm just very impressed with. There's really no point of comparison either, since this is actually the first wind sword adventure we have in the game. So when it comes to building Ku-hai, I definitely think you should play into his focus on force strikes and on criticals. So anything that interacts with critical rate would be great for him. Levin's Champion, if you have it, is a very powerful 5-star option. But to show off a few 4-stars that I think would work well, one with the Shadows can provide up to 5% critical rate, which is going to help him actually get to utilize that extra critical damage more often. And it has Broken Punisher, which, given you're going to be spamming force strikes with Ku-hai, that is going to come into play fairly quickly in a match, and potentially you'll even break the boss twice if it's strong enough to survive that long. The other 4-star Wyrmprint I think is worth trying out on Ku-hai is Lunar Festivities. The boost to 4-strike damage of 30%, once again, is nice because that's what his kit is focused on, and as a sword unit, I think the striking haste is actually going to be really good for him. Being able to fill up his already fast skills more quickly means you could probably pull off an extra move or two per match. Now from there, as far as dragons go, I definitely think that you'll want a strength-focused dragon for Ku-hai. So Rock is a great budget pick, but if you have them, Zephyr or Long Long are going to be the better choices. Now as far as teammates go, I definitely think you'll want to bring along a dagger unit to give Ku-hai a little bit more critical rate. So Su Fang being the only 4-star or above wind dagger, I think he makes a lot of sense. But of course, if you're on a map with the luxury of allowing you to have multi-element teams, you could use a higher co-ability dagger like Dragalia Cleo or even Ezolith. Besides that, I also think skill haste stacking is pretty good on Ku-hai, so someone like Luis or Eleonora would do well there. Luis, of course, has Overdrive Punisher, which, if Ku-hai is doing his job, the boss won't be in overdrive very long, so a little bit of anti-synergy, but not so much that I think it really affects their use together. Now, as far as weapons go, this is where Ku-hai may be let down the most, because both the 4-star and 5-star wind swords have more defensive abilities. The 4-star provides a self-heal and regen over time, while the 5-star provides a defense buff to the user. So honestly, for the time being, because Ku-hai's main use will likely be in the raid, since there's no endgame content where you want a wind adventurer or bog res just yet, I would probably stick with something like Grass Runner, the 3-star wind sword, or just give him a sword that you have lying around, like a neutral 5-star or 4-star sword that has an attacking skill. I think that'll be just as effective for him as either of those defensive options. Alright, and now we finally come to the last new adventure on this showcase, and she is going to be the highlight for many people, Lin You. So Lin You is a 5-star wind element axe attacker, and she has a massive attack stat with her strength at 517, putting her rank 3rd in the game after Ieyasu and Mikoto. So Lin Yu's first skill, Typhoon Fist, deals a combo of hits directly ahead and has a high base chance of inflicting sleep. But while her second skill, Heaven's Breath, is active, it can actually deal even more damage. So Heaven's Breath is a self buff that restores the user's HP, then activates the Heaven's Breath mode for 10 seconds. During that, the user's attack rate is increased by 20%, and like I said before, Typhoon Fist is powered up. Lin You, to me, seems like she's all about dealing out massive hits of damage with her Typhoon Fist combo. Her first ability, HP 70% equals critical rate of 10% once fully upgraded, means that she has a base 14% critical rate as long as her HP is above 70%. She also has bog res up to 100%, just like Ku-hai of course, and she has skill haste that goes up to 8% as her third ability. So to me, there's no question that Lin You is a powerful character. Even being able to inflict sleep is pretty rare, and it's nice to see that on a wind unit. There are two other wind axes though, Johanna and Ronzel. Johanna does have 2 attacking skills, which is pretty powerful, but she has freeze res instead of bog res like Lin You, so they are differentiated in that respect, and Lin Yu's strength and HP are just much higher than hers. Ronzel is more tanky, he has a very low attack compared to Lin Yu, and he can provide a shield to his team, so he has a different function than she does, even though they both have 100% bog res. if you are able to summon this character, I definitely think that she is going to be extremely valuable for the current raid, and very likely to be viable against High Mercury in the future. Defense units are at a premium in High Dragon Trials because you often need extra HP or defense for your vulnerable ranged characters to survive the opening salvos of those matches. So I can imagine Lin You is going to be amazing and very desirable in that context, but you could also imagine that Ronzel might be enough to get the job done too. So if you're summoning just for her, just be advised that it will take a lot of resources to target a specific character. That said, I think that Lin You is a very powerful one, and one that I don't think you could go too wrong with no matter how you built her. But as far as builds go, I would definitely play into her first ability that gives her extra critical rate. So one of the things you might think of right away is of course the Kung Fu Master's Wyrmprint, which basically seems tailor-made for her. It's going to give her 12% more critical rate, putting her above 25% total with her HP above 70%. It's also going to give her 15% extra skill damage for her Typhoon Fist. Now, as powerful as this is, I do want to compare it to Resounding Rendition, which I think is a much better investment for the long term if you want to put your golden keys into the particular Wyrmprint. Resounding Rendition is going to give her 6% critical rate as long as her HP is above 70%, once it's max unbound, as well as 25% skill damage. So 10 percentage points more on the skill damage, and 6 percentage points fewer on the critical rate, but in the end, this would still put her at a really solid 20% critical rate with a higher amount of skill damage. So I think that the trade-off is probably worth it when you consider that Resounding Rendition is so universally useful, not just on her, but on a variety of adventurers. Moving on from there, as far as dragons go, this is definitely a character who wants as much strength as possible. So as I said before, Rock is your budget pick, but if you have Zephyr or especially Long, as far as teammates, just like with Ku Hai, I think that Su Feng is a good teammate for Lin You. As small as the critical rate co-ability might be at base, I do think that every bit of critical rate will help her. Other than that, I also like skill haste on her because she has her built-in skill haste, and she has the ability to increase her own attack rate, meaning she'll be charging up her skills even more rapidly. So once again, I'd recommend someone like Luis or Eleonora. Finally, as far as weapons go, if you want to use the 4-star Wind Axe, that's going to provide a defensive buff to Lin You, and you can take advantage of that with Wyrmprints that have a double buff ability. So if you want to use something like Valiant Crown, that's going to have strength double buff, or if you have a Wish Upon the Yule Tree that has healing double buff, that is a nice little way to make those work. Otherwise, the 5-star Wind Axe is probably your better option if you just want a pure attacker build, because the 5-star Wind Axe does provide another attacking skill, and it's just going to give Lin You a massive amount of strength to top things off. Okay, and that brings us to the end of this showcase review. All in all, I was pretty impressed with this showcase, although my low amount of Wyrmite means I'll probably be skipping it. I think all 3 adventurers are very useful, and Ku Hai and Lin You in particular seem quite powerful. Long and Strabog may not be the best wind dragons like Rock and Zephyr are, but they're still passable. Warrior Maiden I like because it does something brand new, and Kung Fu Master's Promises in the Rain and Lunar Festivities are useful to a certain extent, but likely to shine more in the future if we get our dual Wyrmprint system. Blossoms Ablaze, of course, like most 3-star Wyrmprints, isn't really worth considering. So all in all, I would probably give this showcase a 7.5 out of 10. If you need wind units, especially those with Bog Res to take on this raid, this is a good opportunity to pick them up, especially since I think that both characters work quite well alongside the free unit Su Feng. Definitely let me know what you think about this showcase in the comments below. Are you planning on summoning? Have you already summoned? I'd love to hear what you have to say. But with that, thank you all for watching. Take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.